always grew up with that fear of ending up missing or murdered. And I always had that fear for my mother. And that fear became my worst living nightmare. You can be really, really angry at the world and people, or you can turn your grief around and turn it into something beautiful. And I guess that's what I'm trying to do, and that's by carrying on my mother's legacy through my advocacy. Camp Morgan started after we did blockades at the Birdie landfill. We did 3 days of blockades, and after the third day we decided that we were going to set up Camp Morgan as a tribute to my mother. When I go down to Camp Morgan, we're always doing something different. How's it going, bro? Good, nice seeing you. How's camp going? Back in January, we hung up 101 red dresses, and we've had a couple different other events since then. We've got a lot of community members to come out. We set up a teepee a couple weeks ago. Warriors at Camp Morgan do a good job at protecting camp. They just make sure that things are running smoothly. When we go to Camp Morgan, we're able to chat and explain how we got to where we are today and why we are who we are. Our family has an unfortunate history with landfills. In the late 1800s through the early 1900s, Morgan's great-grandmother, Ava Francis, lived in one. This was an article written when this all first happened on September 6, 1961, about my family. What does resettlement mean to the Indians involved? Don Francis lives on the eastern edge of the highway shack town. He is one of 8 people living in a 20-foot by 20-foot log and tar paper building. The one room has sleeping accommodations for only 4 persons and has no lights or water. In an atmosphere of flies and filth, the Francis family eats and rests from the glare of the summer sun. Asked why she and her people stayed on when life was so poor, Mrs. Francis replied by asking where the group could go. The only other place she claimed was a reserve, and there, if the people don't get rations from the Indian agent, they starve. When these kinds of things happen, it ignites a fire in us, and that fire was ignited over 100 years ago. The only difference was they tried to burn it out with numerous different kinds of colonial systems. My great-grandmother was a residential school survivor herself, and because of that, my grandmother was a survivor of the child welfare system, as well as my mother, who was also pushed through that system. And then she lost her kids to the system, being me, at the age of 6 years old, her only being 24 at the time. That was her downfall, was losing her kids. And when you lose your kids, you lose where your heart and your home is. And she lost that day, as well as her physical home. And you lose your home, you lose your kids, you start to go crazy, you lose your mind. And my mom struggled with mental issues a lot in the end years of her life. She used to sing to me, and I was always told that she was singing even before I was born. My mom used to take me all around the city on bus adventures. And I remember walking up and down Main Street as a kid, and my mom never hid the horrors of the world from me, and she always explained to me, this is what's happening to your mommy, this is why I can't be around, and I wish I could. My mom didn't even have a shack or a home, and she fought to survive, and that survival was taken away from her at the expense of someone else's hands. Indigenous women have walking targets on their back. I never felt safe growing up, and I don't leave my house past 6 p.m. I don't go across the street at a certain time because I'm scared that someone's going to stop and harass me, or I'm scared that I'm going to get robbed or taken. I don't take cabs, and I always tell someone what the license plate is and who I'm driving with, because that's what you got to do nowadays to protect yourself, because no one else is protecting you.
It is important for us to set the record straight. Investigators believe that the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron are at the Prairie Green landfill north of the city.
People seem to think that it's easy or it's going to be extremely difficult, and it's going to be extremely difficult and tedious. She knows we're going somewhere. It's time to finally step up and break those generational curses and give my daughter a better chance at life.
Oh, let's go.
Intergenerational trauma follows and history repeats itself. You fail us once and then you continue to fail us 100 years later. My family went from, let's go this way, being forced off the reserve to living in a landfill to now it being a shocking reality of my mother being underneath lots of debris and trash.
Look at this. What is this?
The cries of our women get louder and the anger within the families gets bigger.
Is this where your grandma is?
What we're left with is the potential task of searching for human remains across a 4-acre site that was 40 feet in depth, heavily compacted with 9,000 tons of wet, heavy construction clay, and distributed throughout the site was 250 tons of asbestos. In addition to that, we had 1,500 tons of animal remains strewn throughout the site, which would make it very difficult to discern human remains if we're conducting a search of that site. We made the very difficult decision as a service that this wasn't operationally feasible to conduct a search of this site.
Why and how did the system fail my mother, and why does it continue to happen to our Indigenous women? Yeah, it makes me sad that I have to put on this fight for my daughter, and that this is taking up my time and energy that I should be spending holding and caressing my kid. But I'm doing it for my daughter so that she can have a better future, and so that I can have a better future with her too, and that one day maybe we won't have to be so scared to go out and even just sit in our front yard as Indigenous women.